Imagine a city turned into a weapon, every street a potential grave, every building a loaded gun, and one of history's most ruthless defensive commanders waiting behind the walls with orders to make the Americans bleed for every single inch. In March 1945, General George S. Patton and his Third Army stood at the gates of Trier, one of the oldest cities in Germany, a Roman fortress town that had survived 2,000 years of war, and now it was about to become the most dangerous urban battlefield Patton had ever faced. The German commander inside had transformed Trier into a labyrinth of death. Minefields buried beneath cobblestones, explosives wired into medieval bridges, snipers hidden in cathedral towers, and kill zones designed to annihilate anything that moved. What happened next was not just a military victory. It was a masterclass in psychological dominance, tactical genius, and the kind of cold, razor-sharp courage that separated George Patton from every other general wearing stars in the European theater. And the message Patton delivered to the man who tried to turn that city into a tomb? It echoes through military history to this very day. If this is the first time you're watching this channel, right now is the perfect moment to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video with someone who loves real history. Because what we're about to explore is one of the most underrated and electrifying moments of World War II, and we want to read your comment at the end. What detail about Patton or the battle for Trier surprised you the most? To understand what made the fall of Trier so extraordinary, you have to understand the city itself. Trier, known in Latin as Augusta Treverorum, was founded by the Romans around 16 BC, making it one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities north of the Alps. By 1945, it sat at the confluence of the Moselle River and the western edge of the Siegfried Line, Germany's formidable defensive wall of bunkers, dragon's teeth, and fortified positions stretching hundreds of miles. Trier was not simply another German city. It was a strategic gateway. Whoever controlled Trier controlled access to the heart of the Reich. The Supreme Allied Commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, understood this perfectly, and so did Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, who had spent months preparing the German defensive posture in the West. But it was the local commanders on the ground, the colonels and generals responsible for holding specific sectors, who had turned Trier itself into something almost medieval in its cunning, a city-sized trap, layered with overlapping fields of fire, booby-trapped buildings, collapsed tunnels designed to swallow armored columns, and infantry positions sewn into rubble with machine guns covering every open approach. The men defending Trier had been ordered to hold it to the last bullet, the last man, the last breath. Patton received his orders regarding Trier in late February 1945, as his Third Army was grinding through the bitter cold and frozen mud of the Eifel region, pushing eastward after the catastrophic German gamble of the Battle of the Bulge had finally collapsed. The Bulge, Hitler's desperate Ardennes offensive, launched on December 16, 1944, had momentarily stunned the Allied advance. But Patton had performed one of the most breathtaking military pivots in history, wheeling 3 full divisions 90 degrees in 48 hours to relieve the besieged town of Bastogne, where Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe had famously answered a German surrender demand with a single word: nuts. Now, with the Bulge defeated and the German army bleeding out, Patton smelled the kill. He pushed his staff relentlessly, demanding speed, aggression, and audacity. His 12th Corps, under General Mantinetti, was tasked with taking Trier. The 10th Armored Division and the 94th Infantry Division were assigned as the hammer and the anvil. But before a single tank rolled toward those Roman walls, intelligence reports began painting a picture that gave even veteran officers pause. Trier was not simply defended. It had been engineered as a death trap, street by street, block by block, with the cold precision of men who knew they were going to die and intended to take as many Americans with them as possible. The German defensive strategy for Trier bore the fingerprints of a military doctrine that had been refined through years of brutal urban fighting on the Eastern Front. Soviet cities like Stalingrad and Voronezh had taught the Wehrmacht terrible lessons about what determined defenders could do to an attacking force inside an urban environment, and those lessons had been transplanted to the West. In Trier, German engineers had rigged the ancient Römerbrücke, the Roman Bridge, one of the oldest standing Roman bridges in the world, dating back to the 2nd century AD, with demolition charges, ready to be blown the moment American forces attempted to cross. Artillery had been pre-registered on every major intersection, meaning German gunners could drop shells onto specific street corners without even seeing the target. Buildings had been turned into fortresses, with interior walls broken through to allow defenders to move between structures without ever stepping into the open. Cellars had been connected into underground corridors. Rooftops had been turned into sniper nests. And mines, thousands of them, had been buried in patterns designed not just to kill, but to channel advancing infantry into prearranged kill zones where machine guns waited in darkness. The men who designed this defensive system were not amateurs. They were veterans, and they were desperate, and desperation combined with expertise is among the most dangerous forces in the history of war. On March 1, 1945, elements of the 10th Armored Division began their push toward Trier from the south, while infantry units probed the outer defenses from multiple directions simultaneously, a classic Patton tactic designed to confuse the defender, stretch his resources, and prevent him from concentrating his strength at any single point. The fighting was immediate and savage. In the village of Zerf, just south of Trier, American units ran directly into prepared German positions and took heavy casualties. Artillery exchanges lit up the night sky. Tank destroyers dueled with German anti-tank guns dug into the frozen hillsides. The noise was, by every surviving account, apocalyptic. A continuous roar of explosions, metal, and human screaming that rolled across the Moselle Valley like a physical thing. And yet Patton did not slow down. He appeared at forward command posts, his lacquered helmet gleaming, his ivory-handled pistols visible at his hips, demanding reports, demanding movement, demanding that his commanders find a way through, around, or over whatever the Germans put in their path. His presence alone was a force multiplier. Soldiers who saw Patton at the front fought differently, not out of fear, but out of something closer to electricity, a current of absolute conviction that if this man believed they could do it, then by God, they would do it. This is the midpoint of a story that deserves to be heard by every person who respects real history. So if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now, like this video, and share it with a friend, a family member, a history lover in your life. Because the next part of what happened at Trier is where the story becomes truly unforgettable. And we want to hear from you in the comments. Did you know about the Roman bridge plot, or the trap that was waiting inside those walls? The critical breakthrough came on March 2, 1945, when Combat Command B of the 10th Armored Division, commanded by Brigadier General William Roberts, the same Roberts who had been at Bastogne during the siege, found a gap in the southern defensive line and drove through it with armored speed that the German defenders simply could not respond to quickly enough. Tanks poured through the breach before it could be closed. Infantry followed. The outer ring of Trier's defenses, so carefully constructed over months, began to unravel in hours. German units that had been positioned to defend specific streets found themselves flanked, cut off, or simply bypassed by the armored tide moving faster than their communication systems could track. By the morning of March 3rd, American armor was inside Trier itself, rolling through streets that Roman legions had once marched. And here is where the trap that had been laid for weeks began to detonate, not in the organized, devastating sequence its designers had intended, but in chaos, as desperate German soldiers triggered demolitions prematurely, fired into their own pre-planned kill zones without coordination, and attempted to execute a defense that required perfect timing in conditions of perfect confusion. The Roman bridge, that ancient span of stone that had stood for 18 centuries, was set to be blown. American soldiers raced toward it under fire. And, in one of the most remarkable moments of the entire campaign, they reached it before the charges could be fully detonated. The bridge survived. Trier fell. The speed of Trier's fall was so complete, so total, that it created a moment of genuine institutional absurdity that has become one of the most quoted episodes of the entire European campaign. When Patton's headquarters reported to the Supreme Allied Command that Trier had been captured, the response from higher command was a message that Patton reportedly read aloud to his staff with a combination of fury and theatrical disbelief. The message, in essence, instructed Patton that taking Trier would require 4 divisions and suggested he bypass the city entirely. Patton's reply, sent back to SHAF with a particular brand of acid wit that made him simultaneously the most effective and most infuriating general in the Allied order of battle, was swift and devastating. Have taken Trier with 2 divisions. Do you want me to give it back? That single sentence, radioed from a headquarters inside a city that was supposed to be impregnable, encapsulates everything that made George S. Patton a figure unlike any other in American military history. It was not arrogance. It was the language of a man who had looked at a trap, walked through it before it could spring, and was now standing on the other side, waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. The German commander responsible for Trier's defense faced the aftermath of its loss with a grim recognition that the trap he had built with such meticulous care had been rendered irrelevant by the one factor no defensive system can fully account for: an attacker who moved faster than the defense could think. In the broader context of March 1945, Trier's fall was part of a cascading collapse across the entire German Western Front. Within days, Patton's Third Army crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim on the night of March 22nd, beating Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's massive, elaborately planned Rhine crossing by a full day, a fact Patton celebrated with undisguised glee. By April, the Third Army was driving deep into the German heartland, liberating concentration camps, capturing entire German armies, covering ground at speeds that made even Patton's own staff struggle to keep pace. The traps that had been set across cities, roads, and river crossings, all the careful, desperate engineering of a Wehrmacht that knew it was losing, fell one after another before the relentless momentum of an army led by a general who treated speed itself as a weapon, perhaps the most decisive weapon in the entire Allied arsenal. What George Patton said to the German commander who set those traps across an entire city was not spoken in person across a table of surrender. It was spoken through action, through armored columns moving at night, through infantry finding gaps where none were supposed to exist, through the survival of an 1800-year-old Roman bridge that was supposed to lie in rubble at the bottom of the Moselle River. The message was delivered in the language that military commanders have used throughout all of history, the language of result, of movement, of will applied without hesitation against every obstacle placed in its path. Trier stands today as one of Germany's great historic cities, its Roman walls and ancient bridge intact, its cathedral still rising above the rooftops, preserved in part because American soldiers in March 1945 moved too fast for the destruction that was planned for it. And Patton's famous radio reply about giving the city back remains one of the most perfectly crafted sentences in the history of military communication. A rebuke, a report, and a portrait of a man all at once. If this story moved you, challenged you, or taught you something you didn't know before, subscribe to this channel right now, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear what real history sounds like. And leave a comment below telling us what moment in this story hit you hardest, because Patton's War is full of moments exactly like this one, and we are just getting started.